Hey guys, okay, what we're going to do today or this week is we're going to look at some key terms and definitions of statistics, okay? Because I know when we begin the statistics section, it's just like words, and it's easy to get lost in all that. So I kind of just want to go back over it and recap. So what is statistics? We know it could be two things, right? It could be the science of collection and organizing and interpreting data. It can also be the data that describes or summarizes something, right? But the big takeaway is that either way, statistics is data or information. Okay. Now, a statistical study is made up of different parameters. Okay, so let's talk about those. The first one is the population, which in a statistical study is the complete set or the entirety of what we are studying. Okay, so it's the whole, the complete thing, right? Now, numbers that describe this certain characteristic, a certain characteristic of the population, the whole, is called the population parameters, right? It's kind of easy. We're talking about the population. Then the numbers are called the population parameters. Makes sense, right? The numbers that talk about the population are called, well, the population parameters. Now a smaller portion, a smaller, more specific set of the population for which data are taken is called a sample. So we can't really ask everybody in our whole group, right? So we have to take a smaller section that we ask from, and that's called the sample, right? Now, the numbers that describe this smaller sample are called the sample statistics, which makes sense, right? If we take information or data, numbers from that data, from the smaller group, well, it's going to be called sample statistics. So if we take numbers from the sample, it's called sample statistics, right? It kind of makes sense that it would have the word sample in that number, or in that word. And then if we're talking about the, whoa, stop it. If we're talking about the numbers, man, this thing's going crazy. If we talk about the numbers for the population, it's going to be called population parameters, okay? It's kind of some connections there for you guys. Okay, so we're going to look at this next little example that I made up for you guys. So we want to know which is the population and which is the sample. So what we're looking at is we have the real world math class of the ASU Mid-South campus. Excuse me. So let me switch colors. Which would be our population? Well, the bigger of the two, right? So this one is the population. I'm just going to put pop if that's cool with y'all. And then which is the smaller of the two, or the sample? Well, that would be our real world math class would be the sample. Okay? I don't know how to shorten sample, so we won't do that. Now, let's talk about what would be our population parameters. So we have 32 basketball players in the student body and 0 basketball players in math 1223. I think that's the class name. I can't remember off the top of my head. But if we're talking about the student body, that would be the whole, right? So these would be our population parameters. That's population parameters. That's good enough, right? And then 0 basketball players in our class. So this would be the sample stats. Ooh, that's not how you spell stats, in case you're wondering. That's more like it. Okay, but you must be careful choosing your sample, because it has to represent your population perfectly, okay? It may be the most important step of any statistical study, because if it doesn't represent your population, it's useless, right? So here, a representative study must represent the population perfectly. So an example would be, if your population is 55-year-old math instructors like myself, right? That's what your population is supposed to be. You don't want to go out and make your sample be from a women's basketball team, right? Because believe me, they're in much better shape than I am. So that would be a terrible, terrible representation. Now, let's change colors. Another one would be, if your population is 24-year-old marathon runners, right? You don't want to go grab a sample of out-of-shape couch potatoes. Sorry, that humored me. Made that one up myself. You're welcome. So that would be a terrible representation again, right? So you want to get samples that represent your population. Okay, those were some silly ones that I just came up with off the top of my head. I guarantee you're not going to find one like that in your book. I'm sometimes goofy, but I try to pick things that you're going to remember when you get on your test as examples, right? So I think you'll probably remember those. Now let's talk about some sampling methods. So sampling methods, you have your simple random sampling, right? And this is when a researcher just randomly picks samples. They're just there, right? So they just randomly pick them, okay? Now, systemic sampling. This involves a system. Like they have a system in mind. Like they select every nth subject, so that could be every 5th person or every 10th person. I don't know, when you guys were in elementary school, did you play like maybe dodgeball or kickball, and they would go down the line and say, okay, every 3rd person go over here, right? So that's like systemic sampling, okay? And nth just is a placeholder, so their thing was the 5th one. Convenient sampling involves a sample being drawn from a part of a population that is close at hand. So this could be like, you just want to go, okay, Memphis, go to the mall and pick your sampling, right? Or go to Walmart and pick who you sample. Something like that. Something that's very, very easy. Go to McDonald's. I don't know, whatever. Cluster sampling. This is where you divide the entire population into separate groups or clusters, right? But I try to avoid using the same word, like clusters here. I try to avoid using it in the description. So I would just say researchers divide the entire group into separate groups. So you would just take the big population and then like cut it into sections and have little groups. Stratified sampling. Researchers divide subjects into subgroups called strata based on characteristics that they share. So you would take the group and divide it into little smaller subgroups based on their characteristics that they have in common. Like everybody with red hair go here, everybody with dreadlocks go here, or everybody with blue eyes go over here, right? Something like that. Now let's talk about bias. Bias is not our friend. It is anything in a statistical study that alters the results, right? So like, what if we did a study on weight, but the scales that we were using were off by 5 pounds? That would really jack the study, right? That's the kind of thing we don't want, right? So bias, bad, right? B, bad. Okay, observational study. This is a study where the researchers just sit back and watch, okay? They do the measurements, they watch, but they don't give any medicine, they don't do anything like that. They just observe and measure. That's all they do, right? It says observe right here, so that they're just watchers, dude. They're not actively involved, okay? Now, an experiment, on the other hand, they do get involved, right? They apply treatment and they observe. So they're hands-on when it's an experiment, right? Kind of think Frankenstein. Now, a treatment group, this should tell you, if it's got treatment, that this is a group that gets the medicine, right? They get some kind of treatment, whether it's medicine or, I don't know, if they're a chiropractor, they get some kind of adjustment. Like they get some kind of hands-on activity during their study. Now, the control group, this, on the other hand, is the group that's in the experiment that doesn't take part of the medicine or the activity, right? So this group doesn't get any treatment during the experiment, okay? Placebo. This is like a pill that lacks the active ingredient. So like if you are in an experiment and everybody thinks they're getting the medicine, but you are going to be in the control group, so you get the pill without the medicine, right? Now, placebo effect. This is very real. It's when a person improves Ooh, snap, sorry. Hang on, let me fix this problem. There we go. It's when a person improves because they believe they are receiving treatment. Okay, so their pill looks so much like the people who really are getting the treatment that they think they're getting the treatment, so their brain makes them get better just because they think they're taking the medicine. So it's a for real thing. It's great. I mean, it's not crazy. It's real. Okay. So single anonymous, this used to be called a single blind study. So if you hear somebody say single blind, it's the same thing as single anonymous. Okay. And this is when the participants don't know if they're receiving treatment. So the researchers know, right? The experimenters know, but the participants don't know. And then there's double anonymous, and then this is when nobody knows. It's wild. No, I'm just kidding. So the participants and the researchers don't know who's getting the treatment. So that way it's completely, there's no bias whatsoever. Nobody knows. So like the results are completely not skewed in any way. These are the most true results that you'll get. Now, a retrospective study is kind of cool. It's for things that we can't do because they could be harmful to somebody or something like that. Like, we don't want to see if seatbelts really save lives, because like, I don't want to say, okay, Tom, you get in the car, but you're going to wear your seatbelt. But now, Betty, you get in your car and you can't. Now, both of you, I want you to drive into that brick wall at 55 miles an hour, and I'm going to see if your seatbelt saves your life, Tom, but you die, Betty. Right? That's not very ethical. We can't do that. So what we do is we use retrospective studies. And these are studies based on past data. So we'll use past accidents, things like that have this data where we really don't have to endanger people's lives. It's from accidents in the past, right? So it's much more ethical that way. So that is some of the very most important, I felt, key terms and descriptions or definitions. So there you go. There they are. And then now I'm going to turn you guys loose to play some Kahoots and word wall games, okay? All right. Have the best day.